Just going to zoom out for a second. So I grabbed something that I was tracing in Illustrator, and I want to illustrate as best I can the resolution. So remember that resolution is typically, like I mentioned, either 72 ppi, which is pixels per inch. You might also call it dots per inch, versus 72. So this file that I built before was at 300, and right now if you look at my rulers, this is at an inch, and we're at 300%, and you can see here, I'm going to zoom in, and what I want to do is actually show you pixels. So as we zoom in, we can start to actually see the little tiny pixels that make up your stuff. Now, what I want you to do is I'm actually not going to count this, but from from the inch mark, which it looks like I scooted it a little bit, over to the 0 mark, there's quite a few dots, right? And then if you imagine an inch, let me just go ahead and drag another guide here, which will be here because our document's 5 inches. So there's an inch. Inside of this inch, there's 300 of those dots. So that's a lot of pixels. You can have a much higher resolution if you want to do 600. That's for some really high-end books, usually like a really nice photo book. And then 8 right here is a document that I made, and it's 72. So I'm going to go up here just so you can see image size, and this is listed at pixels, but you can flip-flop back and forth between which measurement you're using. So this is the one I made, is 300 5x7. If we go over here, here's a 72 dpi one. We've got here's our image. Technically it's 5x7, but it's at 72, which is a third, less than a third of the actual size of a file. It's just so you can see this is what it looks like. So now if we look at, here's my inch mark. If we look at that, you can see those dots a whole lot faster. So here's 700%, and these aren't, this is just to be able to see it. So let me zoom out a little bit to see our 1 inch mark. I forgot, I think I just got rid of it. 1 and 1. So there's our inch, and I just need to actually mark the inch part here. And there's our inch with the 72. So it's a pretty drastic change. You can visibly see these squares much sooner. And in here, you actually have to zoom in quite a bit before you can actually see the individual pixels. So visually, this is what 300 versus 72 looks like. There's just a heck of a lot more content squeezed into 300 DPI or PPI versus 72. A simple way to think about it would be, let's imagine that you have a sweater, a really big open knit sweater. That would be like a 72 PPI sweater. It's really loose and open. Now, if you take that sweater, wash it, and throw it in the dryer, it's going to shrink. And all of a sudden, all that open, loose weaving will shrink down and become 300. But at the same time, it shrinks, right? It becomes much smaller. So you can have an image. Here's an image. I'm going to go look at the resolution. Most images off of your phone are going to be 72. Images off of if you have a really nice DSLR camera, your resolution might be set 96, but most are here. So 72 DPI for a photo. Let me switch it to inches so you can kind of see how this is. Right now, this image it says it's large size-wise, but it's a very low resolution. So if you tried to print this out, it's not going to look great. But what I want to show you is how you can resample an image. So let's say that somebody says, I must have a 300 DPI image, and they will do that. Then you can switch this. But you have to make sure that these are all connected. Resolution is connected to width and height. So when I move this number to 300, there's a drastic decrease in the actual width and height because it had to compensate. You can't just just decide I want a 300 ppi image. There has to be a change in the image. It has to shrink in order to accommodate being now a much tighter image with the pixels. So I went from 2.5. If I go back to 72, the image goes to 10. So what this means is that the image will weigh the same. What I want you to see here is the 2.15 megabyte. That's the weight of the file. The weight does not change if I change the resolution, as long as I don't also change the size. It'll always remain at 2.15 because, again, if you think about the sweater analogy, the sweater doesn't lose weight when it gets smaller in the dryer, it simply shrinks. So just know that if you start off with a really large image, but it's 72, if you have to make it 300 for any reason for print, you might get a strikingly small image. So just be careful about those situations when you are reducing the size of an image, or just make sure you always have your original copy that is as large as it can be.